Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just wanted to make this quick video for everyone. I am Reverend Anna Jones, and today is the June 5th, 2020, and it's the beginning of our very, very powerful summer eclipse season. And today is the beginning of it because it's actually going to be starting here very soon, within the next, looks like hour and a half from the time that I'm recording this video. We won't be seeing it, but there will be a lunar eclipse that will be happening, and we always feel the energies of all of these types of major celestial events when they happen and occur, even if we're not able to see them with our physical eyes. Whenever the sun, moon, and the earth come into alignment the way that they need to in order for an eclipse to occur, regardless of where it's visible, that energetic alignment has an effect energetically on us all. I've been working with energy healing since I was 14, so almost 40 years now, and I'm trained in multiple different forms of energy healing and energy medicine. Also a professional clairvoyant and an interfaith minister. I've been an interfaith minister since 1993, and working with energy and understanding the energies that affect us in our greater environment has been something that has been of great interest to me since 1987. And I've been learning and studying and personally working with the energies of the planet, as well as celestial energies and the way that they influence us all really since that time period, since around the time of the harmonic convergence in 1987. I am not an astrologer, but cosmology is a passion of mine. And of course, that would include some astrology in the sense that it's understanding not just the astronomy of it all, but then how that impacts our world and how that impacts our lives, similar to the way that it used to be in ancient times. Where the astrology wasn't its own thing off here, astronomy wasn't its own thing off this way. They were actually combined in a type of cosmology of understanding that that both were important, and they were basically synthesized with each other to all of our ancient ancestors in the ancient world. So the ancients would have looked at this time period that we're in right now with great awe and amazement, and there also would have been a lot of fear and concern in certain cultures as well, because of all of the combinations of things that are happening at once, not always seen as being auspicious, not always seen as being favorable. I personally, the way that I understand energy is that it's like a forecast. We want to know about these things. We want to know about these celestial events. We want to know about what the combinations are and what those energies may be, the same way we would want to know a weather forecast. But the weather forecast isn't going to take away our free will, isn't going to determine, not everything is set in stone, not everything is set in fate. So the weather forecast is not going to limit what we are able to do with that energy and how we are able to respond and co-create as the co-creators that we are intended to be, with the free will and with the powers of imagination and the creative powers that we've been given. So it's always good to know what that weather forecast is, so what that celestial cosmic weather forecast is for this time period that we're in, and for this time period that we're going through, especially over the next 6 weeks. It's a power-packed time. I was planning on offering something today as far as being able to lead or facilitate something for everyone online, but I figured, as busy as I've been so just incredibly busy with my work, with my private clients, which you can learn about on my website at annajonesonline.com, all the private session work that I do for people all over the world. And I've just been so busy also with my writing and my books that I'm trying to come out with. Now it's more than one. There's just been so much going on that I had hoped to put something together for today, but it didn't manifest. So instead, I figured better late than never at getting this video out, because even though the exact time of the eclipse is coming up here soon, we have the full moon tonight, and we have still those energies that we're in the window of, and we have the next 6 weeks. And this next 6 weeks is very power-packed. Personally, I haven't seen anything quite like it since the beginning of the year, and I haven't seen anything like the combination of what we ushered in 2020 with and what we have right now, cosmologically, astrologically, and astronomically influencing us. The combination of all of the celestial events that ushered in 2020, and now here right in the middle of 2020. I've never seen anything like the combination of all of that combined. But especially when I look at it all combined, I was like, okay, there's always eclipses. There's always, every year we have eclipses. There's always retrogrades. There's always new moons and full moons and super moons. Those things happen on a regular basis. There's different planetary alignments that happen every year, but the particular combinations of them and the clustering of them is also what is making it unique, both back at the beginning of 2012 and how it got ushered in with the celestial events that were happening leading up into the calendar year of 2012. And now here in the middle, 2020, I keep saying 2012, sorry about that, 2020, and now here in the middle of 2020, 2020 it will be a year to definitely go down in the history books. I've known that since the beginning of something like August, September, when a series of messages through some of the work that I do as a medium for the angels and the angelics, a series of messages from Archangel Michael came through in my meditative trance work that I do as a trance medium, and those messages were basically talking about just how powerful 2020 was going to be at creating a new set point, and just how it was going to set the tone for the entire decade that came next, etc. In fact, I had just recently talked about this quite at length on a podcast in which I was asked to do for High Road to Humanity. And that podcast, you can look that up. It's on iTunes. You can try to find that podcast of me speaking more in depth and in detail about, I was just reflecting back on that. And those of you who are on my email newsletter, I got that, I sent that out once already, and I will resend it again. So if you're listening to this and you're not on my email newsletter and you'd like to listen to that podcast and receive the link directly to it, where I do reflect back on the messages and the things that were being foretold, and insight that was being given as far as even work that needs to be done all throughout 2020, spiritual work that needs to be done all throughout 2020. I'll be sure that you put yourself on my email newsletter list, and I'll make note to myself to resend that one more time to everybody before at least before the upcoming solar eclipse that's going to be happening. So the lunar eclipse today is what we call eclipse season, and that means that eclipses always come in at least pairs. That's the normal, that there's at least a pair of them, a lunar and a solar. Rarely, occasionally, not occasionally, but rarely there's three, and then more rarely they can actually come in fours. And I think there's an extremely rare, maybe more than that, but I don't remember. But I do know that rarely it's three eclipses that come together, and then more rarely there's four that can come together. That is the most rare, I believe. But there could be a fifth, I'm not sure. So the rare time right now that we have three. and the time period that those are in, the energies are very, very strong, and they can be very wild and intense. And this particular one, very wild and very intense. And the energies build up, and then they stay with us for a while, and then they start to subside. But they don't just go away. We can be feeling the impacts from an eclipse. Right, we can be feeling the impacts from an eclipse season up to 6 months. And actually, there's an even larger, like 11 and 14-year cycle, something along that time period, that we can also see effects from each eclipse from, that kind of, if you zoom out into some of the bigger picture understandings of those things. But definitely at least for 6 months, actually. And we're about 6 months right now from the last one. The last eclipses that happened right around the time of the beginning of the year, that was in December and the early part of January, where the winter solstice was also in that mix. So this year, for the energies of 2020, the solstices are involved in the energies of the eclipses that have been happening. And definitely that's the case this summer solstice. In fact, the summer solstice, the solar eclipse coming up in 2 weeks from now, so this is the full moon. So the full moon energies tonight are a good time for us to release and to let ourselves really begin to set some intentions, like release emotions, heal, clear emotions. I made some notes for myself. Clear things from the past. Definitely releasing things from the past, old things from the past, traumas from the past, etc. So interestingly enough, for some reason, there's this, I'm making this video on Zoom, and there's this little box that just popped up on my computer screen, and it just says the Crusades. That's all. There's just a little box that just synchronistically popped up on my computer screen that says the Crusades. I have no idea why, but it was right during the time that I was talking about releasing things from the past. And one of the things that I was going to talk about today too is that when eclipses happen, they're always about the shadow and things coming up out of the shadow, things from the shadow history of our past that can be karmically returning, because eclipses also bring us karma clearing and karma returning. So that must have just been an interesting synchronicity. Maybe we have some kind of larger picture message coming through here, that there's things perhaps even clearing all the way back throughout different traumatic events in our past human history. So that's also something that I believe to be very true, and something that is very possible during intense periods like this. So I was just looking down to my notes and wanting to talk about how this can be a good lunar eclipse for releasing and forgiving. And then always working with the power of prayer and intention. These sacred times, because these are all things associated with nature, natural time, sacred time, they're much more powerful than anything in the man-made calendar system. These sacred times are always a time for spiritual practices to be really focused on, to be really emphasized. We always need spiritual practices, and we need to have them in our lives on a regular basis, but especially doing sacred work, sacred healing, sacred ceremony, meditations, you name it, ritual, etc. at sacred times. It gives us so much more transformation and healing as a result of doing that. We get the energetic benefits of that. So this would be appropriate time for any kind of karma clearing that you want to do, prayers, intentions, meditations, affirmations, as well as releasing things from the past, including past traumas, including past things that have really been setbacks. And of course, we see this very much happening in our world right now, how, you know, things from the past must be healed. They must be resolved. We have to change. There is change absolutely necessary, needed to be happening in our world right now. And these eclipses are going to help us do it. They're actually going to require us to do it. They're part of the energy that's just bringing it all up and bringing everything up out of the shadow for us to look at and say, this can't remain any longer. This can no longer stay in your life, in your mind, in your emotions, in your world, in your culture, in your governments and your operating systems. These things can't stay this way any longer. These eclipses, these energies are so sweeping and so transformative that literally these energies are helping to bring all these things up out of the shadow in order to say, transform now. Now is the time for transformation. And now is the time to focus on the transformation that we want to bring and that we want to create in our lives, yes, but also in our culture, in our society, in our systems, and in our world. And I know that sometimes we feel very disempowered to do that, and that it's been very, very challenging for all of us due to the coronavirus and the pandemic, and that we are still dealing with, that we are not out of in any way, shape, or form yet, even though we've gone into a different stage with it. And it's a stage that may be making some of our lives easier, but it's still a stage where we have to be very mindful and very conscientious. And I think that's not by accident either. Personally, the more that I've worked with energy, the more that I've worked with higher beings, angels, spiritual practices, meditation, yoga, the more that I've worked with all the things that I've worked with in my career as a holistic healing practitioner, as a spiritual teacher, etc. The more that I've looked at all of it, everything is interconnected. It doesn't mean that everything happens intentionally. It doesn't mean that everything happens mindfully or consciously. That we're in control of everything. That's definitely not the case. We are not in control of everything. But that higher will, that higher plan, that bigger picture, the whole, when you're able to look at the whole of creation, the whole of life, the whole of the universe, is all interconnected. It's all intertwined and interconnected. So we see right now this incredible opportunity for transformation and so many things connected to it. I believe the virus also connected to the information that I've gotten intuitively is it didn't have to be this, that free will also has played a role. It wasn't like this was fated. It was fated for us to go through this virus. What was more, the fated divine will part of it has to do with the fact that we are going through this transformation, that the transformation is the fated part, the fact that we have to resolve some of these old things from our past and actually finally, once and for all, begin to heal them, move past them, create new, more holistic operating models, new, more holistic systems, more holistic government, more, holism is the operating model of the universe, and we haven't been operating within that operating model. And so all of this is to also get us to get back into a holistic relationship with the earth, holistic relationships with each other, and to help us to really look at bringing that that holism operating model back into, not back, new, actually, brand new, because that's the other thing that these energies are doing. If I use the word back, please know that I'm doing it unconsciously, because I know very well that there is no going back. There's only forward. That's, you can't step in the same river twice, is a very true saying. The energies are different every time, every day. Yeah, there can be, you know, every day a new day, but it is completely different. There's no going back to the past and to what was. There's only what is and what's going forward. And so we can see that all of these things that are happening right now are catalysts for the transformation that definitely was within the higher will, the fated will, so to speak, to play itself out for ourselves. But free will is playing a role. It's really both. It's there's fate and there's destiny, which are all a part of the divine will, the bigger plan, the bigger picture, including even soul contracts that we've written and soul agreements we've made, etc., that it can even be a part of that fate and that destiny. But there's also free will. Think of it as the yin and the yang, the fate and the free will. Think of them. There's a lot of yin and yang energies right now. A lot of the energies of masculine and feminine would be another way of thinking about these polarities. What we don't want to get is into too polarized thinking of just good and bad. That doesn't mean that there's not good and bad. I'm just saying we just don't want to think about all of the energies that are combining right now in just a polarized way of good and bad only. This is a very important time for us to keep our minds open, to keep our hearts open. The sun is related to the mind, the moon is related to the heart. The spirit also needs to be connected, so staying very connected during this time period. I have to move on. There's so much that I would say on this subject, but I want to go on to tell you about the whole sequence of what's going to be taking place over the next 6 weeks, so you have it as a foundation. And then I will be facilitating. So again, another reason, if you're not on my email newsletter already, to put yourself on it, AnnaJonesOnline.com. But I will be facilitating definitely at least one, if not more, events on the solstice, summer solstice solar eclipse, and I will be facilitating something for the lunar eclipse coming up as well on the next full moon. So between this full moon tonight and the next full moon, we will have 3 eclipses for the time period I'm talking right now. The eclipse is happening today, here in just a few, here in about an hour, and the eclipse that's happening, the solar eclipse. So tonight's eclipse is the lunar eclipse of the full moon, and then the second one is on the day of the summer solstice. So on the day of the summer solstice, in fact, within just a very few hours. Sorry, I didn't get the times pulled up. I've been so busy, I didn't have time to give you all those exact times, but there's several websites and there's several astrologers that are giving really good breakdowns of all of this, and of course, astronomy sites that you can visit to get that information from. I wanted to just kind of give you some of my take and some of my insight into that, and also some of the intuitive information that I get about how it all fits together and what's all happening as a result of it. So yeah, so that solar eclipse is the second one, and then that's on the new moon, and then the full moon. So and that'll be on June 3rd, June 4th, June 5th, I'm sorry, July 4th, July 5th. So the summer solstice, I did write down the date of that. Depending upon where you are in the world, the summer solstice is occurring in the northern hemisphere. Obviously in the southern hemisphere, any of you watching for southern hemisphere, is going to be your winter solstice. There'll still be solar eclipse, and it'll also be solstice solar eclipse. It'll just be for southern hemisphere people, winter solstice. For all of us who are in the northern hemisphere, which all this is designed for, since I live in it, and most of my client base is in the northern hemisphere, but for all of us in the northern hemisphere, it's the solar eclipse. And it is new moon, which solar eclipses always happen on new moons because the sun and the moon are tracking together. They're traveling together during solar eclipses. So it's new moon solar eclipse, and that's on June 20th, 21st. depending upon, again, where you are in the world. So there's some of us where it will be on June 20th, and there's some people that will be, there's what it looks like on their calendar date, right? Like the man-made calendar system, the Gregorian calendar that was made by Pope Gregory. So that Gregorian calendar system, which really has no connections to sacred natural time at all, which is a whole other subject to go into that I don't have time to get into today, of how out of balance we are with sacred natural time and out of balance with the planet and things, just because we're not following a calendar system that's connected to the things that our biorhythms are connected to, the things that our brainwave rhythms are, the energy frequencies that our brainwave rhythms are connected to, which is the frequencies of the planet, the sun, moon, and stars. So anyway, back to this. So depending upon where you are, and on that man-made Gregorian calendar system, it will be, for some of us, June 20th of the summer solstice and the eclipse, the solar eclipse, and for some of us, it will be on June 21st. I believe for those of us here in the California area, which is where I'm at right now, the California area will be on June 20th. And that solar eclipse and that exact time of the solstice will be within just a very few hours of each other. But I was going to explain earlier that for 3 days, and this is always important to remember, even I forget it sometimes, but for 3 days before a full moon, 3 days before a new moon, we're in the full moon period, we're in a new moon period, 3 days before an equinox or 3 days before a solstice. I'll explain more about what solstice means, what solstice is, on whatever event that I facilitate. If I'll be doing at least one, and that will be a global angelic transmission from Archangel Michael, which I've been doing a series of for many years now, and I'm very much looking forward to a much needed update from him through this channel work that I do. So I'll be doing that at least, if not something else, on the day of the summer solstice solar eclipse. Whenever, and then 2 weeks later, the full moon again, and then again, depending upon where you are in the world, it'll be July 4th or it'll be July 5th. So most of us here in the United States, I believe it's happening on July the 4th. In fact, there was something I was reading recently that it is going to be visible in North America, and it's going to be the only one of these 3 eclipses that will actually be visible in places here in North America. Of course, I'm not sure, uncertain if that's everywhere. So again, it's good to look up your location in North America or in the Northern Hemisphere and see if it's happening near you. Being able to look that up. Timeanddate.com is one source where you can just put in your own time zone, your own address, and it'll tell you information about that. So when we have that one here in the United States on July the 4th, it'll be very late, that eclipse. People can believe that it's starting like almost at the very end of the day, like 11 p.m. something Eastern time. Again, I'm sorry, I don't have the right exact times in front of me here. Didn't have time to do enough preparation. So 11 something p.m. Eastern time on July the 4th. It'll be still, however, happening on the celebration of the United States Independence Day. And at the very, very end of it, basically kind of the end of Independence Day, culminating in that eclipse, which means that it's going to impact the United States pretty greatly because of it not only falling, being visible here. That's not what makes it more impactful. It makes it more impactful that it is happening on the birthday, quote, celebration, so to speak, of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So that's like a nation's birthday. When you do, if you could go and look, actually, you can go find probably many astrologers who've done this, who've done the natal chart, so the birth chart for the United States, and would be able to tell you, and I haven't gone to any and looked any of it up yet, I'm just kind of going with my own intuitive sense of it all and what all kind of reveals itself to me. But they would also be able to tell you exactly how that's affecting that eclipse, affecting the United States in energies from that eclipse. But it's going to be a pretty big impact, and we already feel it. And to me, I feel like it's kind of it's definitely the culmination of the eclipse season, and when the eclipse season will be finished. So we definitely will be going out with a bang, like literally the night the fireworks are going to be setting off, and after all the fireworks is done, then the eclipse happens, right? So if it's like around 11 something p.m. Eastern time, and the fireworks will be over, there'll be all this, like, things going on. Hopefully, if all goes well with continuing to move forward with the opening up of things. However, I'm not sure the fireworks will be visible the same way due to the pandemic as it has been in the past. It might be more, we're going to see probably individual fireworks displays, or people sitting watching in their cars, or people enjoying the fireworks, practicing social distancing measures. I do very much get the intuitive messages that it's very important that we continue to follow social distancing measures during this time period. We still have at least 1,000 people a day who are dying in the United States alone, just in the United States, from COVID-19. And we need to, this is going to be with us for a while, and we need to remain empathetic. We need to be having even more empathy during this time period. We need to have even more compassion, and we need to be very mindful. It's not just about celebrating. It's not just about having fun. It's also about these combining energies, and like the balance of them. Really coming into balance and harmony. And if we don't take these energies and work to balance them in us and balance them in our lives and bring them into balance and bring that transformation into the world, then it can be very chaotic. I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. We've the combination of all these energies, I'm looking at them, both the ones that from the beginning of the year and now here in the middle of the year. I've been looking at them going, no wonder we've been going through what spiritual teachers and the ancients would have called a dark night of the soul. It's like when you just combine it all, it's like, okay, yeah, perfect combination for going through a collective dark night of the soul. Dark nights of the soul always come to a conclusion. They are always for the highest good. The highest good always will come about as a result of them, but they are very difficult to go through, especially when you're in it. And we are still in it. In fact, we're going through a whole new phase in it, and whole new parts of things coming into it. The dark night of the soul is a time where there can be a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, a lot of illusion, a lot of deception, a lot of illusions also being shattered, and questions about what is real and what is not real is very common during dark nights of the soul. Usually something traumatic facilitates it a lot of times, but it can happen at any point in time for any of us individually. It doesn't require just traumatic things to happen, but traumas definitely can be the impetus and precipitators of triggering individual to go into dark nights of the soul. But then when we go through collective ones, there can be other things like soul contracts involved. And soul contracts can be involved also in our personal ones as well. But soul contracts, we have personal soul contracts, and we have soul contracts that we make with other people, but we also have a collective soul contract for what we've all agreed to do and what we've all agreed to do here together, and the free will that we have set forth as to even taking birth into this nation and this world at this time. And we need to know that sometimes things that are written into those soul contracts can even be the things that trigger the dark nights of the soul, because the dark nights of the soul can sometimes happen when we need to go through a major shift or a major awakening or a major transformation like we're all going through in order to wake us up further, in order to get us to open our hearts further, open our minds further, learn, see, etc. So much more than what we were before. Every dark night of the soul, once we emerge through it, is a leap forward in our spiritual journey, a leap forward in our spiritual evolution. So we have that to look forward to, and to know that that is the reason for it all. But it doesn't make going through it, knowing that doesn't make any going through it not happen. It doesn't mean that we can deny, ignore, or suppress the things that are happening. There's an enormous amount of that happening in our world, where people want to just deny the things that we see happening with our own eyes, where there's wanting to suppress or create illusion, and then oppression. There's been so much oppression that has happened throughout our history that just cannot continue to happen anymore. And it's time for it to shift and change. And of course, we see that in all of our news stories right now. We see that in all of the things happening when we turn on the television, and we see this incredible movement that is happening for bringing peace and justice to the peoples of our nation, and that includes people of color, that includes people who are minimized, people who oftentimes get forgotten, get overlooked. There's just been so much injustice that it is actually time for some of those wrongs to be righted. And that's actually part of this rite of passage of the dark night of the soul, which the dark night of the soul is also a rite of passage. So this is also part of that. And it's our opportunity to really transform and co-create. At the beginning of this year, the messages that were given was about really knowing that we need to co-create, not just at the start of the year, but to continue to do that all throughout the year, working with the energies that were coming, and to use it as a time to really get clear on dreaming new dreams. Dreaming new dreams for ourselves, dreaming new dreams for our world, for our nation. What does that new dream look like? It can't continue to be the way that it has been. It just can't. It is not just coronavirus that's changing it, and it's not just the movement that is changing it with the marches that we see happening, and the shifts that are happening right now. It's all of it, right? It's all of it combined, and each one of those things is very important, and each one of those things we have to acknowledge, and we have to face. We can't run, we can't hide, we can't deny. I think that's the other thing about all of this combined. It's like we can't hide from it. We can't just continue to turn a blind eye. There's still so many that choose to want to go into that denial, and we have to look in our own self and go, okay, what way have I been in denial? What way am I still in denial? What way do I still want to hide? What way do I still want to, am I even contributing to the imbalances? Am I even contributing to the injustices? In what way? And we may think, oh, no, I'm not. But maybe there is. In fact, I believe all of us are co-creating, right? So we're all co-creating this reality with divine will and free will. So there's the divine will that gives us kind of like the bigger template, the bigger input, and also make sure that the highest good always comes about, make sure that love and light will always prevail. But then there's free will, and all of the co-creation that we're doing free will. And so we're all co-creating what we see happening in our world, and the balances that are happening there. So anyway, going on, and there's a few more things that I need to say about the summer eclipse that is happening. This particular eclipse is called an annular eclipse, and it is one in which you can actually see the ring of fire. It won't be visible again here in the US, but for those who will be able to see it, you'll be able to see the ring of fire. That ring of fire around the sun is actually called the corona. Corona means crown, and the corona has been an ancient word used for a very long time to represent the solar energy. This circle of solar energy is the circle of solar energy around the sun that the sun emits, the corona of the sun, the crown, the corona of the sun. So this is actually an eclipse in which the corona will be visible. And oftentimes people call it also the diamond ring eclipse. And it's happening during the time period that we are just still coming into the next stage and still dealing with this pandemic that interestingly, and what seems to me like synchronistically, has been called coronavirus. That doesn't mean that that there's anything nefarious about that in any way, shape, or form. The corona of the sun is this illuminating part of it, and the illuminating part of its light that can still shine and that can still be visible even during the type of eclipse that we're going to be having. So that also, I felt like it was giving a message. That's the way my intuition has been interpreting it, a message that this coronavirus can also be seen as something that is waking us up. That is, even though it's as dark as it is, and we've been going through this, painful dark night of the soul that we're even experiencing economically, and that we're going to be feeling even more of the impact of the economic impact of it all. That light still shines even in the midst of the eclipse. The corona helps us to remind us that that light is still there. So let's use that as a reminder. We'll just use it as a reminder that the light is still there, that the eclipse will pass, that the coronavirus will pass. In fact, I do feel the energy shifting quite dramatically, which is a very good thing, but it's still something that is shifting. We need to stay mindful and conscious of, and all the things that it's trying to bring to our awareness and to our attention. I'm just looking at my notes here because I know that we're getting long here on the message. I didn't want it to be this long or go on for this long. A couple quick things. The new moon that is happening on the solar eclipse is the moon in apogee, which means that it's farthest from the sun. And so the sun will be in its the sun will be in its strongest place of summer solstice. So for Northern Hemisphere, the sun is in its strongest place of summer solstice. The moon will be in its weakest place energetically, weakest place as far as its light and its energy and the distance, farthest distance from the sun. So the sun in its strongest place, the moon in its weakest place. The sun is the masculine energy, the moon is the feminine energy. There's always a lot of yin yang, and the masculine and feminine, the way those dynamics play themselves out. That seems particularly significant to me, that the sun is in its strongest place and the summer solstice when the eclipse takes place, and also that the moon is in its weakest place. And so it's like strong yang, strong yin. It's strong yin, strong yang, not just yin and yang, right? Not just masculine and feminine, strong masculine, strong feminine coming together all at once. So here's another factor that plays into this: 5 planets being in retrograde during this month, and soon to be 6. In fact, it'll be right after the summer solstice solar eclipse that we will have Neptune also adding itself into the retrogrades. And for 2 days, from the June the 22nd to June the 24th, there will be 6 planets. in retrograde. There will only be 2 that aren't. Of course, the Earth isn't counted in that, but there'll be Uranus and Mars that aren't. But Mars is all the way up until January of 2021, and this is in Western astrology that I'm speaking about this. But in Western astrology, Mars is going to be in the sign is in the sign of Aries for the whole rest of the year, which is its sign, and a sign where it can have a lot of powerful masculine, yang, even aggressive kind of energy, again, if that energy isn't used properly. So these energies, they are like the weather forecast, right? It's like, so what are we going to do with them, right? So it can be very aggressive energy. And then in retrograde, all of the other planets in retrograde, it can feel like things are moving backwards. Any retrograde, right? Like even one planet in retrograde, and depending upon what the planet is, it can feel as if something is moving backwards, because that's what a retrograde actually is. From the human eye, when you're looking at it, you're looking up to see it through a telescope, or if you were to track it somehow with your eyes visibly, then you would be seeing it as if the planet is moving backwards. Of course, the planets aren't moving backwards, it's just an angle of vision, and that's something to really keep into consideration right now. As these amplifications from these eclipses, from the solstice, is amplifying everything, and is amplifying the effects of 5, and for 2 days, 6 planets being in retrograde during it, it may appear like backward movement. It may appear like setbacks, which is also very common, by the way, in dark nights of the soul. It's very common that we go through periods when we're in the dark night of the soul, especially when we're in the darkest part of the dark night of the soul, where it feels like we're having a major setback, where it feels like we are moving backwards, not forwards. We've taken 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That kind of feeling is what we can get about it. But it doesn't mean that that's necessarily true. And again, it doesn't have to be stated, that doesn't have to happen, that doesn't have to occur, even though the energies may make it feel that way, and the energies may make us vulnerable to doing things. I mean, we definitely need to be conscious and conscientious, and not take risks or do mindless crazy things. We actually need to be very, very practical, and we need to be very focused, and we need to speak our truth and continue to speak up. I keep saying remain peaceful but never silent is this affirmation that keeps coming to me, is this phrase and message that keeps coming to me. We need to remain peaceful and calm and centered, but never silent, and never at this time withdrawing our light. We don't want to withdraw, but we do want to relax, rest, all the things, all the words associated with RE at the beginning are words associated with retrograde periods. Those periods in which it can appear as if everything's moving backwards. And it's going to be on all of these levels, 5 planets for the entire month. And like I said, during that 2-day window, right after the solstice, between June 22nd and June 24th, 6 planets. So 6 planets of retrograde. So that's going to feel like, major backward movement. Where are we? Why is this happening? Confusion over never thought we would see this happening in my life, or never thought we would see this happening in our world, in our nation. I am experiencing that. I am feeling that. I am experiencing having to remind myself on a regular basis, and having great compassion, because I have, even knowing all the things that I know and all the insight that I receive and all of the things that have been taught to me and revealed to me, all the tools that I have, it's still something that just can wake up some days like, oh, I never thought I would see this happen. Oh, I never thought I'd see this happen. Oh, it looks like we're going backwards here and not forwards. So where are we? Where are we? However, that doesn't mean that we aren't being set back by some of it. There can be real setbacks are happening and occurring. Not saying that all of the backward motion and all the things that we feel as setbacks are illusion. I'm just saying that emotionally, especially with 6 planets coming into retrograde, but with 5 and then 6, it can feel bigger and way more amplified as a result of it. Remember that all of these things, I always use this word every time I speak about any of these cosmological events, that all of these things amplify everything, right? So just think of them as like big amplifiers that amplify whatever. So that if you're thinking a certain way, it'll amplify those thoughts. Feel your feelings, it'll amplify those feelings. Things that are coming forward out of the shadow to be seen, it'll amplify that. It'll amplify the light, it'll amplify the shadow. And there's an immense amount of shadow energy. There's an immense amount of it, and that's not me being negative, and that's not me thinking negative or trying to project something negative, because in no way, shape, or form am I doing that. And I'm an eternal optimist, and I believe very much that we need to know what the energies are in order to know how to respond to them, and just being able to face that, be able to face the pain and suffering that we see in our world right now and not run from it. That is so important. Face it, see it, embrace it, be with it. Use this time to see all the stuff that's coming up out of the shadow in yourself, in your life, and in our world, and to look at it. Don't just like try to hide from it. In fact, because there's so much shadow energy right now, with the planets being retrograde, this backward motion. They're not in the forward, giving us good energy, giving us all kinds of like positive movement energy forward, like they are when they're in direct motion, and it can be very conflicting kind of energies that we experience. And when Mercury goes retrograde, I actually did write down the date for that on June 17th. So here in the next few days, about 12 days from now, on June 17th, Mercury will go retrograde. It'll affect, a lot of things with communications and our ability to really communicate very well with each other. And that already feels like it's already been impacted. So we have to be even more patient than ever. It's a time period we have to be in our light stronger than ever. With all of these eclipses, the shadow covers the light, right? So the shadow covers the light of the moon. The shadow covers the light of the sun. It's temporary, just like the dark night of the soul is temporary, just like the retrograde is temporary. It's all temporary. Everything in this world, in the material world, is temporary. The only thing that's permanent, that's forever, is of the spiritual world, of the spiritual nature. So it's temporary, but the light is covering, the shadow is covering the light. There are many ancient cultures and ancient people that saw the eclipses as being inauspicious, and that they were not times of good energy. They were times where the light was being covered. So that was not a good thing. That was not always seen as a good thing. There were times of amplification, and there were times for prayer and ceremony and ritual, and those rituals could bring that light back and maintain that light while that light was being covered. And there's something to say for that. I mean, when you look at energetically what is happening. And so we have 3, right? We have 3 eclipses and the retrogrades, which again give that that backwards energy, that conflicting energy, that confusing energy that adds into the mix with it. And you have the moon in apogee on the solar eclipse. When it's supposed to be, the solar eclipse on the summer solstice. The summer solstice is supposed to be the time of peak light. That is it. Whenever the summer solstice arrives, it's the longest day of the year. It is the strongest solar energy, the strongest light emissions, photon emissions coming to the planet. It's the time of peak light. And so on this day, when normally we would be experiencing all this incredible life-giving life force from this peak light on the summer solstice, there's going to be an eclipse. You know, so it's the light is being shadowed temporarily, but it is being shadowed, and it's being shadowed with the moon in its weakest position. So the sun in its strongest position, the moon in its weakest position. It's conflicting energies. They're opposites. They're polar opposites, and they're in these polar opposite positions. This peak light, this shadow energy, at the farthest, at the strongest. These are opposites. And so opposites can clash, but opposites can also attract. Again, depending upon what we do with the energies, and depending upon other things that are karmically meant to come into being, you know, destined, fated, etc., to come into being. But we can still ride through these energies in a very, you know, balanced and harmonious way. So I am encouraging everyone to really take it seriously, to work on your balance, and to work on anything that you can do to help others, anything that you can do to be involved. To combine the energies together synergistically is the best way of working with them, instead of like opposing just opposites, right? So to combine the energies somehow synergistically. And that doesn't mean that we can expect that, that all opposition is going to be over. It doesn't mean that we can expect that just only peace is going to be happening, but hopefully breaking through. Another message I got this week actually is breaking through to a new peace. That once the shadowing of that light moves, then a breaking through of that light again, and breaking through to a new piece. And when there is this much of the shadow energy involved, there's also the necessity for us to shine our light more than ever. It's actually going to feel in some ways more like a winter solstice in that way, where it's going to feel like, okay, there's this shadowing dark energy that we also have to work with, which means I need to use my light more than ever. And so we need to use it in the yin and the yang way. So, and especially with all these retrograde energies. So this is what I wanted to share with all of you, and I'm going to try and wrap it up here. Passionate, so the yang energy of passionate, active, engaged, responsive, responsible. Those are all things that we really very much need to be doing. We need to be passionate, we need to be active, we need to be engaged in whatever way we can. I know we're in a pandemic, but it doesn't mean that we can be irresponsible. It doesn't mean that we have to be irresponsive. It doesn't mean that we have to be disengaged. We can. There's so many ways in our lives. It doesn't mean we have to be inactive or, you know, dispassionate. No, this is, if we want to use this energy correctly, we need to be passionate, active, engaged, responsive, and responsible. So those are the key words that were coming to me today for the yang response that we need to be having and working with. But then we also need to be working with the yin energies, and we need to be working with those yin energies combined, which is why I'm making this, and in synergy with each other. And so at the same time that we're passionate, active, engaged, responsive, and responsible, bringing the yin energies of remaining detached. So we need to be passionate, very passionate, and yet detached to the outcome and the result, detached to just detachment doesn't mean dispassionate. It doesn't mean disconnected. It just means surrendered. Again, not giving up, but giving it over, right? So it's like I am practicing detachment, spiritual surrender at the same time that I am passionately, actively engaging, being responsive, and being responsible. So the yin energies also, to work with all of this, is active and reflective. So we want to be active, but we want to be active from a reflective place. We're so used to the two-dimensional one or the other. Like I have to be active or reflective. When all of these energies combined, to me, this is the biggest message. The biggest thing for all of it for us is we have to rise up into our higher nature, to not just be one or the other, one versus the other, you know, to actually move into uniting them both in unity. You know, we need unity in our diversity. Unity and diversity is how nature works, it's how the planet works, it's how the operating model of the universe works. So we need that in our lives, we need that in our system. So for that unity in diversity, unity and diversity to be present, we have to have both. You know, unity and diversity, the yin and the yang and the yin. You know, we have to have both of those energies simultaneously. So we have to be active and reflective at the same time, simultaneously. We need to be engaged, you know, and also receptive. We need to be engaged in doing things, and we need to be allowing ourselves to receive and open to receive and reflecting so that we can receive in so many other ways. So these are the key words and terms that came to me. So responsive versus reactionary. Those are other, you know, to one versus the other, right? It's like I'm going to be reactionary only, or I'm going to be responsive, and I'm going to be, you know, maybe even irresponsive, or you know, not responsive, right? So kind of like one or the other. We don't want to be reactionary. We want to be creating consciously, not just reacting from our raw base emotions, and definitely not reacting from our raw base fears. So we want to be in that passion, and also in that detachment, and we want to be responsive, but not in that emotionally reaction, just reacting to everything, but choosing like where that action is going to be coming from, choosing to come from a place of action rather than just reaction. And be resolved or resolute versus removed, right? So we want to be resolved, but we don't want to be removed. So we want to be like that resolved, passionate, active, engaged, responsive, responsible, all at the same time, that we are detached, reflective, receptive, etc. We have a lot of rethinking, and we have a lot of remaking and reshaping and redoing to do to break through to a new piece, to break through to a new paradigm. That's also what all these energies are ushering in, breaking through to a new kind of peace, not just squelching everything down, okay, let's get back to normal, let's get back to peace. Let's just squelch everything down and ignore everything going on with the virus. Okay, let's just squelch everything down and ignore everything that's going on for social justice right now. Okay, let's just squelch everything down and ignore everything that's going on in our politics, in everything going on in our world, in our climate, with climate change, etc. Let's just squelch it down and go back to normal, so that it can just be peaceful. We can be peaceful. That's not what peace means. That is not peace, and that's not going. We're not going back to peace. There's no going back. There's only now, right? There's only the now, and now. We are transforming. We are breaking through. These energies are transforming. Eventually, that shadow will pass the moon. That shadow, which is happening here very soon now that I've been speaking so long, that shadow will pass the sun. That shadow will leave, and that light will break through. We are breaking through to a new light. The ancients understood this as, once that removed, it's a new light. It's not even the same light anymore. It's the same sun, obviously, but it's new light every day. And the sun is going through different cycles as well. That's something else I don't have too much time to speak about, but I will say that all of this with the sun, moon, and the earth, and these alignments that are happening with these eclipses, these 3 eclipses are also happening during a time period where some scientists say we're coming out of, some say we're kind of deep in the middle of. I'm not quite sure which I feel about it, but we are in a time period of low sunspot activity on the sun, very, very low sunspot activity, and so that means we're in a period called the solar minimum. Think of it like the tides. The best way is my nose itches. Think of it like the tides, the high tide and the low tide. That's the best analogy that I can use to try to describe it to you. The other thing would be maybe the moon, as it lives the full moon and the new moon, right? It has its peak energy of the full moon, and it has its softer or most subtle energy at the new moon. Well, we have like high tides of the ocean, low tides of the ocean, where the energies of the ocean are calmer and where the energies of the ocean are stronger and more at the peak of strength, right? So, and they're both good. One's not bad and the other is good, right? So new moon, full moon, both are good, but they're just different, right? So that's the other thing. We need to just understand that unity and diversity means that they're just different. They're all good. It's all good, but they're just different. And the energies of the sun also does this. There's a time period where the sun is at like maximum sunspot activity and maximum solar energy, and that's called a solar maximum. And think of that like a high tide or a full moon kind of energy, that maximum energy activity that's in the sun and that's coming from the sun. Well, we're in a solar minimum. That solar minimum also contributes to, all these eclipses are happening during a solar minimum, that the light of the sun and all of the energies that it can emit isn't as strong. It's kind of like the low tide or the new moon. It's just not as strong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's, that it's weak. It means that it's subtle, right? So like the new moon, it doesn't mean the moon's energy is weak. It's just subtle, and that subtlety is playing a role in all of this too. But when you add it all together, it indicates that the light and the positive energy that we all thrive off of, especially during this time of the year, is not as strong as we usually like it to be. We like strong energy. We like we like that strong influx of light. There's something that we have as a preference of human beings to it. But we are instead experiencing a lot of this shadowing, and we're experiencing a lot of this the subtle energy. So we need to attune more to the subtle energy and make ourselves more subtle and work with it in a much more subtle and nuanced way, even though we want to be passionate, active, engaged, responsive, and responsible, and at the same time detached and reflective, receptive, etc. So we want to just be aware of all of these things. In summary, the last thing that I will say is that a lot of astrologers agree with me on this. A lot of people who are looking at this, if in ancient times, if all of these things happened, the ancient times would look at it and they would concur that it would be the time of the fall of the king. That would be one of the ancient predictions that would have been associated with all of these things. That would be the time for the fall of the king. Now, I'm not saying who that king is or what that king is, because it's not necessarily, it could be a person, it could be a leader, it definitely could be a nation, it could be an empire, it could be, you name it. And it could be also, which is another way of looking at it and working with it, it could also be predictive of something regarding our ego as well. And because the ego likes to think that it is king. It likes to think that it's in charge and that it's in control and that it is king. And the ego has a shadow side to it, by the way. And the shadow side of the ego, the shadow side of the ego can also very much rear its ugly head during time periods during all of these energies. So we want to shine our light of illumination, shine our light of awareness, shine our light of awareness upon that. And it's a time for us to try to do work on our own ego and bring that shadow of our own ego out into the light and bring it into alignment, because in truth, the ego likes to think it's king, but it's not. It's not king. The soul is who we are, and we need to live and operate and speak and act and do all that we do from the true self, from the true soul, from the true higher self that we are, and the true nature of who we are. But if we allow the ego to be in control, and if we allow it to be king, then it might be in for a rude awakening. Because if you take that as being the king that's falling, then it could be things that could be happening in our lives that to rudely awaken us out of that ego. Rudely, just like, that kind of make us face it. So that's all I have to say. Believe me, there could be some more. I'm sorry I went on for so long, but I do hope that you enjoy this and you get a lot out of it. And I will be sending some more out when I can, as I can. And like I said, please go to my website. You can read more about my bio there. All the things that I do, all the private session work that I offer by phone and by Zoom for people all over the world, both healing sessions as well as reading and coaching and counseling, etc. There are things that hopefully I'm going to be getting back to doing here in California as things open up more later in the summer, hopefully. And I just want to send out all of my prayers and all of my blessings to all of you listening to this right now, and prayers and blessings to all who are struggling, all who are suffering, to all who are in pain, for that healing and the release of that to happen during the time of this eclipse, which is just getting ready. Interestingly enough, I think I'm finishing right now as the time that this eclipse is happening, finishing this recording. So I guess maybe it was timed after all. So. And many blessings also to the families and to the loved ones who are all grieving right now. To the families and the loved ones of George Floyd who are grieving, and my many blessings to the other families who are also grieving the loss of their loved ones from not just injustice, but also from the coronavirus, as there are, like I said, 110,000 now. I believe it was 10,000 in last week, so we're up to 110,000 now just here in the US of deaths of people who have left their bodies and crossed over. And there's those who are suffering and grieving. So my prayers and blessings also for all of those who are grieving, and for all of those who are in harm's way. Just sending out prayers of blessings to everyone who is doing so much and who are serving in so many ways and so many capacities, and to each one of you, sending out my prayers and blessings for all of the light that you bring into the world. Just shine it more than ever. Just shine it very, very, very brightly right now. Blessings to you all.